And joining us with some thoughts on the speech is Boston City Councilor at Large, Annissa Essaibi-George. Thank you very much for being with us, Councilor.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. Thank you, Chris.
Well, you heard the mayor last night, opening doors, more access to things, including housing. What did you think?
Well, I also would say the opening doors piece, but then also for everyone else to look towards Boston, because not only is it happening here, we're setting the example and we're setting the model for the rest of not just the Commonwealth, but the United States on what being a progressive city looks like.
We'll talk about the context here because the mayor has some ambitions. He's pursuing them, but he has some city councilors doing that too, right?
Yeah, no, we've got a pretty engaged and pretty active city council, and I'm really happy and feel very lucky to be able to do my part on the pieces that I've been focused on. And last night, the mayor's speech was certainly ambitious. He was able to say what he could say in a very limited amount of time. He certainly rallied the troops and excited a lot of us, including me, to get to work today, and that's what the Boston City Council did. But what it also did was remind me of all of the work that we have ahead, whether it's facing this housing crisis that we're facing as a city, that we're creating the affordable units that we need to be creating, but also looking to make sure that our city is open for business for those that are on the lower income, that families can afford to stay in the city of Boston, that we're creating those housing units. He talked a little bit about education. For me, education is so incredibly important. That's been a large part of my focus of my work on the Boston City Council. I was hoping for more details last night, but again, he's restrained by the few minutes that he has to speak. And for me today at the Boston City Council, I was able to roll out some of my interests, some of my work ahead on the council this year. We also talked a little bit about the opioid crisis, and we know that the recovery community is really important to the mayor, and he shared some insight into the work that lies ahead for him and his administration, has, I think, motivated some of us to make sure that we're doing the work we need to be doing, especially on the Boston City Council. Because again, it's a great speech, it's very uplifting, and now today, the next day, it's followed by the work that lies ahead.
Judging by audience reaction, the comments about the opioid crisis by the mayor last night were one of the high points, so we're going to let people hear that.
So if you see a needle, call 311 and we'll come and get it. But if you want to see needles stop, then understand what it takes. It takes resources, it takes commitment, it takes a community. Our plan for a recovery campus on Long Island is not about rebuilding a bridge. It's about rebuilding a life by getting that person and thousands of others across our region the care they need to get well. That's what we're doing.
Councilor, what about this? I mean, it's obvious, as the mayor says, you got to think of the people who are struggling with addiction, but for kids going out to that playground near the Orchard Garden School and seeing the needles, do you really need to call 311 every day to tell the city that there are needles there? Well,
I think the 311 comments about that measurement piece, that data, we need to understand and have a very deep understanding about the crisis, about the human toll that the crisis has taken on both those that are in active substance use, the families and the communities that are impacted by that crisis. But we also need to have that measurable information. We need to be able to count those needles so that when we activate the Mobile Sharps team, which I worked really hard in the last few years to increase funding for that Mobile Sharps team, and we're going to work to do it some more this coming budget cycle, that when we're thinking about the impacts, that we have to understand that data. We have to know the impacts. So 311 is an appropriate place to collect some of that information, but it shouldn't be at the delay of getting that needle picked up. We also need to make sure that as we're picking up needles, it helps us identify hotspots across the city so that the Mobile Sharps team in particular can be a lot more proactive about going out and sort of cleaning and picking up proactively. And you know, we have work to do, and that is no doubt one of the sort of afterthoughts of last night's speech that I have internalized.
As the mayor indicated last night, he is indeed spending a lot of money to make things better in the schools, but there are also these disconnects about what's going to happen when there are changes, or those older immigrant students being told that they're being sort of, packed off when they're
Yep.
22 years old.
Yep. Well, I call it booted out. We have kids that are turning 22, and for me, it's the kid that's turning 22 that's so close to graduation in their senior year of high school or in their final course credits to earn their high school diploma. We've welcomed them to our schools, and in particular, we have a large population at BADA. And then halfway through that school year, we've told them, I'm sorry, you've turned 22 tomorrow. You're turning 22. You've got to go. Today's your last day at school. We are supposed to be in the business of supporting our kids, helping our kids, and that period of transition, that time so close to graduation, we need to make sure that we're supporting those kids in their final time with us as high school students, getting them to graduation, getting them to that high school diploma, so that they can have a much more productive post-high school life, whether it's in college or work.
Another aspect of inclusiveness involves women. The mayor recently came out with a report about what to do about harassment on the Boston Fire Department. The reception to that wasn't altogether positive, even from city councilors.
Yeah, so we had a review of the audit report, the internal investigation, a few weeks ago, and there still remains some questions about the investigation, about how deep it was, how thorough it was. A lot of the information that was shared in that report, is sort of formalized knowledge, things that we already knew. And the mayor and his team have outlined, or there are recommendations in that report that were outlined that the mayor is committed to responding to and acting upon. For me, one of my questions on those recommendations is the timeline. What is the timeline? And immediately or as soon as possible or in the near future is a half okay response. For me, it's about when, and identifying that timeline and getting to it for those recommendations, but making sure that the report itself was done as thoroughly as possible, as well as possible. And there are a number of concerns that we brought up as city councilors, the women in particular of the Boston City Council, some of the concerns we had about the process of that investigation and how it all went down.
What about housing? I mean, every year I hear the mayor talk about something new that he's going to do. He's delivered on a lot of these things too. Is that enough, or is it maybe a little too incremental?
Well, it's that challenge that we face in government when we get into this business, we all think about the big changes, the very dramatic improvements that we can make as elected officials and government officials. But unfortunately, it's that struggle or that conflict with the problem of incremental change. And incremental change often becomes the sort of easiest stone to push or roll up the hill that is often, maybe the hill should be called bureaucracy. But we often get stuck in that, the effort around those incremental changes. I know for me, we set lofty goals, we think about those larger strides, but recognize that there are some small steps and baby steps along the way that we can affect some changes, not as dramatic or as drastic as any of us hope to do, but realize that sometimes we do find some gratification with those little incremental steps.
Finally, judging by applauses last night, it seems that maybe the star was somebody who wasn't even there, Ayanna Pressley.
Well, Ayanna was certainly a star, and we celebrate her success, and I was really happy to be able to enjoy some of that celebration in D.C. with her a few weeks ago. But I think the bigger applause, not to take from Ayanna, and Congresswoman Pressley deserves quite a bit of applause. My favorite line of the night, and whoever wrote it into the mayor's speech deserves a whole lot of credit for this, was the recognition of the Tech Boston basketball state championship win. And part of that line, I think, was the importance of the mayor's ability to deliver it properly. Because
and he looked like he thoroughly enjoyed it.
You know what, we all did. And that was a fantastic way to celebrate the youth in the city of Boston, their achievement. I tweeted out, because it truly was my favorite line last night, that celebration, but I tweeted out, the only thing that would have made it more perfect for me was if the mayor used a hashtag that I use when celebrating our kids, and that's City Kids Win. And when we give them these opportunities to not just win, but to play and to be a part of something larger than themselves, whether it's athletics and team activities, whether it's art or music, whether it's an incredible opportunity outside of the classroom. When we give our kids that, we give them an opportunity to win, and that's where my hashtag City Kids Win comes into play. And it was a great celebration for that team.
Write that one down. Thank you very much for being with us.
No, thank you, Chris.
City Councilor Annissa Essaibi-George.